Oh, you know what time it is. It is time to get over there and go Petey Pablo on us, right? Take a shirt off, twist it on your head, spin it like a helicopter, go crazy, because it is Friday night, and we got the big tilt for some DFS. Listen, y'all got to hear enough of me last week, right? Because I did a solo show. It's probably my first solo show that I've done for DFS in like 3 years. And I just ran through it. Although I had a few hits, it wasn't nearly as good as it could have been if I was joined by somebody like I'm joined by tonight. That is Neil Orfield over there. Neil, what's going on, man? How you doing? I'm happy to have you in here. What's going on?
I'm doing well. It's Friday night. Love me some weekends, just 2 days, 2 sleeps until NFL Sunday. So I'm excited. Happy to talk some DFS. I'll be, of course, talking DFS all day tomorrow as well. But, I'm happy to talk DFS all day. So happy to be here.
You're going to be talking DFS again tomorrow?
All day tomorrow.
Where, when, what?
So I'm on the Stochastic. I'm a Stochastic employee. I have two shows that I do every Saturday talking about the Sunday main slate, and then I also do NBA live before lock for Stochastic on Saturday. So it's actually one of my busiest days of the week.
So Neil, real quick, because I've been playing, I've just been dabbling, I've been playing, I've been sprinkling some picks. We were talking earlier about underdog. I've been sprinkling some picks in, right, in the NBA streets, and I've actually hit on quite a few. And honestly, I don't have any kind of analytical background for the NBA. I don't study it. I'm a fan of the Knicks, which, goes to show you probably why I haven't been following the NBA as closely as I might if I actually enjoyed, the sport. But I mean, I feel like I've been hitting on it. So is it really that easy to just make money on that if you actually understand the NBA and the analytics?
No, I wouldn't say that it's that easy to make money on. I mean, so as I was saying, I live in Minnesota. We don't have legal sports betting. It's just prop betting here. I said yesterday for NFL yesterday, I just threw out a card. So I have access to Odd Shopper. It's kind of the sister site to Stochastic, which does like a market-based approach, looks at all the different books, knows the sharp books versus the soft books, and kind of compares them to each other to find sharp lines. I have access to that, and yet I still can't help myself. I still I'm on the treadmill. I'm just like, this looks good to me. And rather than using, advanced tools, I just throw cards together. But even with the advanced tools, it's oftentimes these prop bets, oftentimes the best you can find. It's like, this has a 56% chance of hitting the over or the under. It's not like you're getting bets that have a 90% chance of hitting on these prop sites. So no, I don't think it is that easy. You really do need to grind to find the best lines across books and across different sites and have the best information you can. You can be profitable. I know a lot of people who are very profitable at this stuff. I don't actually take the prop betting all that seriously. So as I said, when I made my underdog card, just kind of throwing it together offhand instead of looking at advanced stuff. I take DFS way more seriously than I do my prop betting. But no, I don't think it is that easy, to be honest.
That's because DFS is getting harder and harder as people get more and more educated. And, there's people out there that continue to expand their repertoire and their experience within the sport. So obviously, if y'all play NBA, DFS, y'all should go check out Neil tomorrow. He's going to be talking about it all day. Neil, are you ready to kick this episode off? You ready to build some lineups? Because that's what we do on the show. We just build lineups and give people, cheat codes as to how to make money.
Yeah, building lineups, my favorite thing to do. So let's get into it.
Let's go. All right, Neil. So we got a few things to talk about. A few different things that are happening inside of the NFL. And I mean, last night was brutal for a lot of people in fantasy. So I don't want to dwell too much on that. I don't need to recap about how everybody with Joe Burrow, their entire fantasy season has just gone down the drain. The people with Mark Andrews that have been leading. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into it. We're going to focus on what we have on the rest of the DFS slate for week 11. I'm happy for all of those who are joining us. Make sure y'all get out those pens, get out the paper, and take some notes. But we got some quarterbacks that actually, it's a good quarterback slate, right? Like, we have these quarterbacks. They finally reached the pinnacle of the pricing. We've pretty much seen where these guys are going to be. There's no more, week 5 cheat code where, you're still looking at what Justin Fields in the 6K range. There's nothing like that, right? We're getting what's given to us. However, these expensive quarterbacks, the quarterbacks in the top 4 or 5, they have some tough matchups, right? And although these matchups are something that you typically want to attack, I'm not necessarily sure that I'm sold on doing that this week. Like I'm not saying like, oh man, you got to go play these expensive guys. And I feel like that's somewhat counterintuitive because the quarterbacks somewhat separate you from the slate. And if you go out there and you play the majority of the cheaper quarterbacks, you're going to lose a lot more often than you win. Now, sometimes you can hit a home run, right? Like, Baker Mayfield in the past, CJ Stroud, you can have occasional home runs, but man, it's kind of brutal just to go out there and play these low salary guys. So are we out, Neil? Are there some cheap options on the slate? And you don't have to go through and tell me which ones, but are there some cheap options on this slate that you could really feel yourself getting into? Or do you feel like you kind of got to pay up at quarterback this week?
Honestly, I think it's a week where paying up at quarterback makes a lot of sense. Just looking through our projections, I'm seeing what the top 5 projected quarterbacks on the slate for us are all over $7,000. So it is a little bit tough. I do see a few cheaper names that I could take some shots on, but they're not like the best builds. Like typically, I think this is a week where a lot of us are going to be funneled to a similar build, which is going to be expensive stacks, go cheaper at running back. I think that's going to be a pretty common build this week. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you can do that. Maybe you and I will try to flip the script on a lineup here or there just to see what we can do with a cheap quarterback. But I do think that from a projection standpoint, it's looking like a slate where paying up at quarterback, paying up for your stack makes some sense.
I mean, I feel like there are some places where we can make some of these mid-range quarterbacks work with like the more expensive wide receivers. But the only way that you're going to be able to get in multiple wide receivers, which, by the way, the expensive wide receivers feels like where the money is going to be sitting. Trying to get 2 of those guys into a lineup with even a mid-range quarterback seems somewhat impossible, but I think it can be done. Are we out if we don't play at least one 8K plus wide receiver, though? Like, we've been seeing, like, the CeeDee Lambs go off, the Tyreek Hills going off. Like, if you end up not having a Tyreek Hill, for example, and he sees 20% ownership, or you don't have a CeeDee Lamb who sees 20% ownership, you don't play those guys. It almost feels like you're out of the running because they are putting up such a significant amount of points, unless you're just trying to go home and make $8, when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, looking at our top projected receivers, our top 5 are all 8,000 or more. So certainly it is looking like the best receiving plays on the slate are pretty expensive in this one. But I will say the 6th best projected receiver as of right now, $5,900 for Tank Dell. So, we can find some cheaper receivers, but for the most part, Tank Dell is kind of on an island there as far as projections among cheap receivers. Just looking through the top projected, most are like 7,000 plus in salary. So it is kind of tough to go to some cheap receivers. We can find a little bit of salary relief in that Texans Cardinals game. Maybe if you want to go to that Tennessee Jacksonville game, you can find some sneaky cheap receivers there. But yeah, for the most part, you're right. It is all of the top projected guys are the more expensive receivers. And it's pretty unlikely that all of those expensive receivers miss this week. So you're probably going to need at least one. Try to get 2 in there if you can. I think I'm with you that it's going to be a little bit tough to get away from the expensive stacks.
Neil, if you say Tank Dell again, I might, have to take a quick commercial break. I'm just saying, like, you don't know how much I love some Tank Dell, especially in DFS.
All right.
I love it, man. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to build a few lineups. We're going to start out with the lineup that's going to involve some of our studs. We're going to discuss some of the studs that we believe should be in the majority of your lineups. Let me go ahead and pull up DraftKings real quick. Add this in. This is going to be our lineups. Everybody, make sure that you keep in mind. Let me get Neil's face back in here. Make sure that when you keep in mind, or when you see this, you keep in mind that this is a skeleton build, right? We're giving you advice as to what your build should look like. And then it's up to you to kind of play with some of these guys and figure out which ones work the best. And I'm telling you right now, the best way to do that, instead of having to build 150 lineups yourself, is go over there and use the DFS optimizer over there on playerprofiler.com. It'll literally take the players that you want, the players that we tell you to play, right? And then it'll build all those lineups for you. So maybe you're new to this, right? Maybe you're just kind of checking it out because you have a losing season for your season-long league, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to try DFS so they can still play fantasy football. Well, the DFS optimizer is the way to go so that you can kind of, get that in, even if it is the 5-cent type lineups that you want to get in, the nickel ones, right? Just kind of play around in the DFS streets. All right, Neil, I need to get from you some dudes that you really are going to be focusing your lineups on. Like these are stacks or individual players that you think is going to be in a high percentage of your builds. And it doesn't have to be stacks, but it can be. You can do skinny stacks with run backs. How do you feel like going about this? Where do you feel like you're aiming at?
All right, let me give you 4 players to start with here, because I think that there is a pretty obvious one to start with. And oftentimes, I start with like the most obvious build, and then as I'm building, I get away from it because I think a lot of the field is going to get there. And then I'm surprised on Sunday that the field doesn't get there as much as I should. So I'm going to give you one that to me seems really obvious, just 4 players to start with that should work a majority of the time, which would be Tua, Tyreek Hill. Start with that stack. I think that is, to me, just looking at the stochastic tools, though, that looks like a fantastic stack. We have it projected for, we have Tua projected for 5.4% ownership. We have Miami being the top stack 19% of the time. Our top projected quarterback and wide receiver on the slate is Tua and Tyreek Hill. So for me, I'd start with Tua and Tyreek Hill. That's expensive though. It's a really expensive stack. So I would like to throw in, I'll do the bring back with Josh Jacobs, who we actually have a little bit over owned in the stochastic tools. But if you're going to stack up that game, I think that Josh Jacobs, especially with AOC in there at quarterback, like Josh Jacobs makes a lot of sense it makes sense that they would want to give him a lot of volume. Good things happening there. Tough, easy matchup there with the Miami defense. So I like the idea of going Tua, Tyreek Hill, Josh Jacobs, and then for salary savings, throw Devin Singletary in there. Devin Singletary, who had 30 carries last week, and we already had Dameon Pierce ruled out once again this week. So yep. 30 carries now against a Cardinals defense that is one of the worst in the league. I think you start with that core 4. Honestly, I haven't tried to build it, so I want to see how much salary we will have left over. But I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's actually where we can start a build for sure. We'll discuss a few of these players and we'll start getting onto that build. But I would like to start there because I have not built a Tua stack yet this week. So that's very interesting. Now, I'm a little bit curious. Obviously, Singletary is projected at extremely high ownership this week. But outside of that, quarterback especially, I haven't seen too many quarterbacks that have been chalked this week because not a lot of people want to play the expensive quarterbacks, especially with the expensive wide receivers. Meanwhile, the cheaper quarterbacks feel like you can't get there. So you end up with a lot of quarterbacks that are in the range of like that 6K. Do you have a chalk quarterback that you have projected?
Who do we have projected as being the chalk?
Yeah, is there anybody above 10%?
We actually have Brock Purdy coming in at the highest ownership, so which is a little bit surprising, but I guess that's if you're trying to pay down at quarterback. Brock Purdy is the one who looks like we're expecting people to do that, to pay down for Brock Purdy against Tampa for 11% ownership. So he is in our projections currently, and this things change obviously as you get closer to Sunday, but as of right now, we have Brock Purdy as the chalkiest quarterback.
Yeah, I had a whole section typed up for Brock Purdy, and then I go to check ownership projections, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and take out this entire paragraph in this past hour and a half that I've spent doing research on Brock Purdy because he is the only chalk guy. And honestly, of course, that research remains in my mind, and I think we will come across and talk about a couple different lineups with Brock Purdy in it. But I agree with you 100%. Let me ask you a little bit about Stafford. Do you think Matt Stafford coming back, it's time for Cooper Kupp to kind of reignite that flame? How are you feeling about Puka Nacua? Is this a matchup that you might want to attack?
Yeah, absolutely. A matchup that looks good here. Stafford just 6,400, so relatively inexpensive, and we have him at under 2% ownership currently. Who knows if that's going to change, but it's a fine matchup with the Seahawks. We have, what are the Seahawks in terms of DVOA? The Seahawks are 23rd in terms of past DVOA. The Rams have a 22.75 implied total as of when I made my sheet. Should be a close game with the Seahawks, and that's just, it hasn't really hit yet, the Stafford to Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp stack. I kind of want to try doing that double stack, though. It's obviously expensive. Neither Kupp nor Puka is a pay down option, but I kind of want to try because we do have a relatively cheap Stafford. I think it makes some sense to go to some lineups. And Cooper Kupp, 8,100 is not really that prohibitive relative to, in the past, we've seen Cooper Kupp get as much as 9,000. Puka Nacua down to 7,100. So less expensive than they were at one point, at least. So I do think that is a stack that is going to go a little bit under owned. And looking at our top stacks tool at Stochastic, we have Stafford projected for just where I had this. I want to say 1.8% ownership, but I want to double check it. Yeah, 1.8% ownership going to Stafford, 7.1% chance of the Rams being the top stack. So that looks like a great place to go.
Oh man, Neil. I'm there with you to an extent, but it feels like you're chasing the dragon, man. It feels like you're playing that stack almost every week, just hoping that one time it hits with both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Is that what you're doing over there? Are you chasing the dragon a little bit?
A little bit. I've tried it before, has not worked out. But I will say this: same thing was going on with CJ Stroud for a while. We were never seeing Tank Dell and Nico Collins go off in the same week, and I guess we really didn't see quite that. But we saw CJ Stroud go off with Tank Dell and Noah Brown instead, and Dalton Schultz. So, the fact that it hasn't hit yet, it's a small sample size. NFL seasons are not that long, and these are two elite receivers who get just enormous target share. So I have to think at some point there's at least a possibility that it hits, and when it hits, it can hit in a big way.
You know what's a way easier dragon to chase is any rushing quarterback below 7K, right? And that's one of my rules. Is like, hey, if there's a rushing quarterback 7K or below, I'm playing them in at least 25% of my lineups, minimum 25%. It was that way with Anthony Richardson, right? Who just played around 6,500 for a few weeks before he ended up getting injured. It's been that way with Justin Fields. And with Justin Fields coming back, he's just too cheap at 6,900. I've got to play Justin Fields in a handful of lineups this week. And when we look at, the matchup, right, it's a dream with the Detroit Lions all of a sudden out of nowhere becoming a pass funnel defense, right? Like, it's not like they have a bunch of studs up against the running back, but they've been really, really good. And so teams have just opted to pass against them because Detroit's also putting up points. And I feel like this could be the same week. I mean, 2 of the past 3 games, the Lions have allowed at least 320 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. The one that they didn't was up against Aiden O'Connell. So, I mean, this is a Detroit defense that's just giving up a ton of passing yards. And so I feel like Justin Fields needs to be a lock in a lot of people's lineups, in addition with either DJ Moore or Cole Kmet. I don't know if I play them both. I think you can play them both, but I'm probably going to be doing a one-off of that and then run it back with like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, some other sleepers that we can talk about in a little bit as well.
Yeah, I can't get there with you on the 25% of lineup. That is a heavy exposure to the Bears. I think that it makes some sense though. I understand what you're saying. It's definitely an interesting spot for a quarterback like Justin Fields, who has legitimate 100-yard rushing upside. So when you get that kind of quarterback at 6,900 and projected for under 4% ownership. So definitely see your point with Justin Fields. Not somebody who immediately jumped out to me. And I still don't think of the Lions as being like an elite matchup for opposing quarterbacks, but you're right. Like there's certainly the upside there any week with Justin Fields, and at that price tag, that ownership, I think that makes some sense to go there as well.
All right, so let's go ahead. Let's build a lineup. I know you have a couple other ones we can talk about. We can bring them up throughout the episode. Let's go ahead and let's build a lineup. And the one that you brought up, I would love to do a build around. That's going to be Tua, who is the second most expensive quarterback on the slate at 7,700. We talked about him. We talked about Tyreek Hill. So let's go ahead and get Tyreek Hill in. Woo! Off the bat, we only have 33,000 left. Meanwhile, you talked about running back with Josh Jacobs. You sure you want to go there? You sure you want to run it back with Josh Jacobs?
I am. I want to at least try it, see what it looks like, try it on, see if we can make a good lineup around it. If not, maybe we go back to, a Jacoby Myers or something. But I think Josh Jacobs, to me, when I look at the slate, seems like a great spot. I think he's going to get the volume there in a nice matchup with Miami. So I want to take some shots on Josh Jacobs. I will say, looking at the stochastic tools, looks a little bit overowned this week. So my instincts are not in line with our tools. And typically when that happens, the tools are going to be correct. But at least in a Miami stack, it makes some sense as a bring back.
So I am going to do a placeholder defense, as most of y'all know, just to get it out there. If we decide to change it later on, we absolutely can switch that up. You did bring in Devin Singletary as a guy that you want to run it with, so that actually correlates. I put in the Texans defense at 3K. So let's go ahead. We ended up putting that in. Do you want to play Singletary to correlate with the Texans defense?
Yep, let's throw Singletary in there as well, because we kind of need the cash savings too.
Yeah, at 5,300, that's an excellent savings. But I mean, we got some work to do, Neil. We're sitting here with 4,475 average remaining salary apiece. I feel like this creates an opportunity to pivot down. And one of the more popular options to pivot down to this week, Michael Wilson, who popped up on the injury report. I didn't see the details on that. and Rondale Moore, who is one of my sleepers. We can discuss it in detail later. Are you interested in playing either one of those guys as a run back up against the Texans? Because we are playing the Texans defense. I mean, we can still get turnovers, pick sixes, sacks or strip sacks with touchdowns. And Rondale Moore, one of these wide receivers, can still be relevant. Meanwhile, they're cheap. They're dirt cheap.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point in Rondale Moore. We saw the volume come up last week. Finally, with Kyler back, Rondale Moore got some targets. 2 targets total over the past 2 weeks I have pulled up. What is the price tag on Rondale Moore? He's not somebody that I immediately thought of, but he's one of my highest exposed best ball players. So I'm looking for a week for Rondale Moore to finally blow up.
Rondale Moore is sitting here at 3,300.
With Kyler returning, the entire offense changing, like a guy who has not really done it at all this year. Yeah, love the 8 targets last week. That's pretty interesting at 3,300.
5 receptions. They're all short.
Yeah,
you're not really bringing it anywhere. But I mean,
we saw that last year too. He had games where he had like 11. Like they were just peppering him with targets last year.
But keep in mind, before the injury, right? Before the injury, back not this past, or I guess this past year, right? When Rondale Moore ended up sitting out the majority of the season. I mean, they were targeting him deep. They were utilizing him. It's just they've been running the ball so often. And this past week, the Cardinals passed a lot. Like their passing percentage above expected was, I think, the most of the season. And that's, I believe, because Kyler Murray was there. And I did not expect that. I expected them to run the ball a ton, easing him back in. That's not what they did. I mean, maybe they stretched the field out a little bit. Maybe Rondale Moore gets some action. And these guys are zone beaters. And the Texans, I mean, first off, I don't want to get too much into it because I'm going to talk about it in a second. But, the Texans play a lot of zone defense. I mean, the pass that Stingley was beat on last week was just blown coverage. Rondale Moore, with how much they move him around and motion him, he could see some busted coverages and some excellent opportunities. So I like Rondale Moore this week as like a sneaky, type play. Can you get behind me on this or do you want to go different route?
I'm happy to give Rondale a shot. I think that as far as the super cheap guys, I think he has just as likely he's just as likely to hit as any of the other cheaper guys, particularly because at this point, like, nobody really knows what to expect. We have a 1-game sample size with Kyler back this year, but if you want to expand that sample size to last year, we definitely saw some of those games where he was targeted a ton. So, and we kind of need the salary savings in this lineup. So in this one in particular, I think it does make some sense.
Meanwhile, I will bring up that, Singletary, somewhat chalky. We can see some ownership on Tyreek Hill, but I mean, way to get off the Singletary ownership with this type of lineup is not only playing the Texans defense, but also playing Rondale Moore against the Texans defense, because Rondale Moore is going to accumulate the majority of his points off of receptions, potentially touchdown, but they're going to get a touchdown regardless. You're just weighing that Rondale Moore is going to be the guy that scores the 1 or 2 touchdowns that they get this week. So let's go ahead and let's leverage off of the chalk plays that Arizona is going to be by playing Rondale Moore against the running back and the defense. Now, where do we go from here? We're sitting here at 48-66 apiece. We have Tua Tagovailoa, Josh Jacobs, Devin Singletary, Tyreek Hill, Rondale Moore, and the Texans defense. We still need a wide receiver, a tight end, and a flex spot. Neil, where are we going?
Yeah, I kind of want to fill in that tight end spot with somebody cheap, since we know that we need to have some value options in there. So I think we can go to a cheaper tight end. I don't know. Logan Thomas makes some sense to me against that Giants defense that has just been atrocious. Logan Thomas is just 3,700, so the price is right there. Luke Musgrave, I guess, against these Chargers could make some sense. Let me look up what the route participation has looked like over the past couple weeks for Luke Musgrave.
It's looked good, and his average depth of target has looked good recently too, I believe.
Yeah, he has over the past 2 games, 103 total air yards for Luke Musgrave. 65% route participation. He has 8 targets over the past 2 games. So for a relatively cheap tight end facing a pretty bad Chargers defense, I think, that's something you can certainly make a case for Luke Musgrave as a contrarian and cheap option.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Luke Musgrave will see a little bit of ownership this week. Nothing that should ever scare you away. I mean, we're talking probably like, 5% or so, if not less. Okonkwo, I think, is interesting, just as like that boom bust play. If we see this game going to a shootout, especially if Treylon Burks misses a game, you never know when Okonkwo could actually go off. But I like Musgrave here. I think Musgrave is my favorite tight end, even over Logan Thomas in this price range. I'm down to throw in some Musgrave. Let's do it.
Let's give it a shot.
Oh man, now we're sitting pretty here. We're sitting pretty, Neil. We got 5,500 left, man. We can buy the world up at this point, right? Now, I don't think we can buy the world, but we can at least opt to go with a guy around 7K in the pivot down to the 4K range in the flex, or in the wide receiver position and pay up in the flex for a running back if you'd like to do that. How do you kind of feel this route going? I know that we talked about Puka Nacua, who could be an option here. We talked about Tank Dell, who you love and I love as well. I don't want to talk too much about it. I mean, is there another guy that you feel like fits better with this lineup, or maybe somebody with the Chargers that you would like to leverage?
Yeah, we could probably play one more Texans player if we wanted to. So either Tank Dell or Dalton Schultz would make some sense in this one. I'm trying to see what other cheaper options we have. I mean, Calvin Ridley, somebody that we could play, hasn't really hit yet, but that Tennessee defense has been a pass funnel. So 5,400 Calvin Ridley makes some sense to me. We could always go double tight end, go to another cheap tight end in this lineup. A lot of pretty interesting options that we could consider. We didn't go to any of your, I know you're big on Fields this week. We didn't go to any of your Bears pass catchers. We could go to a Komet here if we wanted to in the flex. What would you rather? Do you want to go
to be honest, like we know that the Lions are going to focus in on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think focus in on DJ Moore, right? The Lions are going to focus in on DJ Moore. I think that Darnell Mooney has some dart throw appeal. Like I don't believe in him or anything this week, but I do think that Fields gets there somehow, some way, and whether that's through the conventional DJ Moore, the conventional Cole Kmet, or takes a shot with Darnell, who we know he's had a connection with in the past.
Yeah, so our tool, so looking at the Boom Bust tool in Stochastic, we have Darnell Mooney projected for 5.4% ownership with an 8.5% chance of making the optimal lineup. So we've got some nice positive leverage on Darnell Mooney if that's a route you want to go to.
I would love some Darnell Mooney in one of my. I don't know if we should play him right here. I'm kind of getting a little bit like nervous saying let's go play Darnell Mooney, but I'm down. I mean, this, like I said before, this is a skeleton build for your DFS lineups. If you don't like Darnell Mooney, then go opt off and play another guy in that price range. I'm down to take a shot with you on Darnell. I mean, if it gives you, weird feelings, knots in your stomach and stuff, dude, those are typically like the best lineups, right?
True. I mean, I will say this lineup is looking very contrarian now. I mean, we even like Tua is pretty low owned. I think Tyreek a little bit chalky. Devin Singletary kind of chalky. I guess Josh Jacobs a little bit too, but we're getting to enough low owned pieces to offset the chalk. So I think it makes some sense. Then what we have 7,700 left over.
I did not realize, excuse me for completely breaking this off and your question off. I did not realize, I never looked at DJ Moore's price. I just assumed that I was going to play him, so I never even looked at 5,600 for DJ Moore. That's absurd. That is absolutely absurd. I feel like DJ Moore is going to be on almost every. I don't know why I never noticed this price. I think he's going to be in every single one of my lineups this week. 100% ownership on DJ Moore. Not really, but just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, God, why would we pay down for Darnell Mooney if we could pay up for DJ Moore?
Yeah, I mean, we could throw DJ Moore in there. Obviously, the price is relatively reasonable there for DJ Moore. So if you'd rather go that route, we're going a different direction. We're either going stars and scrubs or two mid-range plays. Both are totally viable.
But let's see stars and scrubs real quick. And if we don't like it, then let's pivot down and we'll go with we'll pivot up and go with DJ Moore. But right now, Darnell Mooney at 3,300 leaves us with 7,700 left, so we can play another stud, another star, like you said. And I mean, double stack with Miami. Anybody go with Jalen Waddle?
We could do. Well, click on the flex because we could play a running back here too if we wanted to. So we just want to see all the best options. Yeah, Waddle.
ETN's interesting, honestly, but I don't like ETN up against Tennessee, to be honest.
Waddle fits in there perfectly. That's actually. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to just go to the full on.
Fits like a
double
glove.
stack. It's like a glove. It really does.
All right. So my question for you is that Josh Jacobs, right, goes in there. Like the story that we're telling with this lineup is that not only are the Raiders keeping up, but the Raiders are likely winning this game, and the Dolphins have to shoot out to keep up because they're not going to keep running with Josh Jacobs unless he's getting touchdowns and they're winning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that they trust AOC all that much at quarterback. Having rookie quarterback in there who's not all that great. I think just looking at the matchup, I mean, the Dolphins are 26th in terms of run DVOA on the year. We're not really expecting the Raiders to take a lead, but as long as they're keeping up, I think the Dolphins are going to keep throwing the ball. So if the Raiders are just able to keep it like reasonably close, I think we'll see the Dolphins continue to throw throughout the game. So yeah, it is like the Dolphins running attack has been so good this year that they're not necessarily the double stack, not necessarily getting there as much as it did last year, but we've seen it work several times. The Millie Maker winning lineup has been the Dolphins double stack several times over the past year. So who says it can't happen again, right?
All right, we're in there, man. I'm hitting enter right now. This is a single entry contest. I just hit enter. We're in there, dude. We are good
Beautiful.
to go. I love it. And, you know, it's kind of funny because like the Dolphins, who started out with a somewhat average, right, secondary to begin the year, ever since they've gotten Jalen Ramsey back, it's feel like they've been a different animal. So I feel like in order to beat the Dolphins, they will have to run the ball a ton with Josh Jacobs, which I feel like we've seen to an extent thus far on the year. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get our pretty faces back up here. And we got to talk. We got to do something real quick for the fans, just so that they know. We got to do a read.
Hey, so many ask me, what's wrong with sports books? Why so many of them fail? The answer is simple. They don't innovate. They're just casino sports books on a phone. That's all they've been. There are a few that are doing a good job. We partner with them. Most of them, not so much. Until Bet Openly came along. Bet Openly said, hey, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something groundbreaking. We're going to have peer-to-peer betting in all states, and you pay 1%. When you win, you pay just 1% on your winnings. You heard that right. It's 1%. With code Underworld, you qualify for just that 1% transaction fee on Bet Openly. It gives you ultimate flexibility to set your own lines and browse lines that others have set. Think about it. That's what betting should be. And now that is the reality. BetOpenly.com. The code is Underworld. Check it out.
You set your own lines? Neil, you set your own lines. That's crazy. Like, I don't even...
And the payout changes based on the line that you said? Is that how that works?
I guess.
That's really interesting.
That's Bet Openly. That's something that you got to go check out, everybody. Go check it out. You heard it from the Podfather himself. Oh, man, yeah. We got some other lineups to build. I can't take too much time up. We're already sitting here at 32 minutes into the show. I'm sorry to rush you. Let's go ahead and let's build another lineup. But before we build another lineup, we got to talk about some guys that we do not want in our lineups, right? Some guys that we think are going to be too chalky or too expensive or somebody that you don't want to put in there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start you out this time, right? I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of a clue as to where I'm going. And this week, I mean, I love Marquise Brown, right? This guy is not for tournaments, right? Like, he is one of the most consistent wide receivers in terms of fantasy points we've ever seen in the NFL. And everybody thought coming in, this is the perfect boomer bust candidate. Somebody like a Jameson Williams type player who will, get you 5 touchdowns or get you nothing. And that's not who Marquise Brown has been. He's actually been very, very consistent. But the Texans, man, the Texans have the return of Derek Stingley. And last week, sure, he ended up giving a touchdown away. But honestly, if you watch it, it was a blown coverage over top by the safety. Derek Stingley was supposed to pop up and cover Jamo Chase, who was coming underneath. Said Trenton Irwin blew by him. He tried to catch up, wasn't there. So honestly, I don't think that was Derek Stingley's fault. Outside of that, Derek Stingley allowed 1 catch for 3 yards to a tight end who he was playing off coverage on. So, I think Derek Stingley's the real deal. Now, Derek Stingley plays one side of the field. They move Marquise Brown all over the field. But the Houston Texans play more of a zone type coverage. We already know that the 2 guys that they go to in zone coverages are Mike Wilson and, of course, Rondale Moore, who we've already discussed. When it's man-to-man, we're talking Marquise Brown, game on for Marquise Brown. When we're talking about zone coverages, we're going to pivot off of Marquise Brown. Now, listen, I love the connection that we saw potentially happening with Marquise Brown and Kyler Murray. I mean, they just missed a touchdown last week, like by inches, right? The downfield completion percentage or on-target percentage for Kyler Murray is insane. Meanwhile, we know that Marquise Brown can get downfield. And I'm going to play a lot of Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown to close out the season in DFS, but this is not the week to do so. This week, we're going to go ahead and fade Marquise Brown, and we're gonna play some Michael Wilson. We're going to play some Rondale Moore, and we can play some Trey McBride. But all four of those guys are honestly pretty chalky across the board.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, that's exactly how our tools see it too. We have Marquise Brown a little bit over-owned, around 12% ownership, 11% chance to be an optimal. So not crazy negative leverage there, but we do have negative leverage on Marquise Brown, while we have positive leverage on Michael Wilson. Looks fantastic right now at 3,400. We've got him at 10% ownership, 14% chance to be an optimal. I'm not sure if Michael Wilson is going to play. Currently questionable. Obviously, Rondale Moore will get that boost if he's out. But yeah, Marquise Brown does look a little bit over-owned as of right now in our tools. Trey McBride, somebody who also has a little bit of negative leverage in our tools right now, just because we have him at 19.4% ownership. We still have him optimal 14% of the time. So largely our tools are in line with exactly what you're saying. Just like Marquise Brown, a little bit over-owned, probably not going to be a big part of my lineups, just because you don't want to chase what the field is doing.
Yeah, obviously that's a big one, is chasing that field, right? So who do you have over there that you want to fade? Like, is there anybody that you're like, you could not catch me outside putting them in my lineup? Like, is there anybody in that realm for you?
I don't think I'm going to get to a ton of Breece Hall, just not the best matchup in the world with the Bills. And we've got him at 17% ownership with a 9% chance of being optimal. So just negative leverage there on Breece Hall. I think I would throw him in that bucket. We actually have Pat Freiermuth getting quite a bit of ownership for the Steelers. He's 2,500. So my first instinct was the same as what we're expecting the field to do, which is $2,500 Pat Freiermuth seems too cheap, but who knows if he's going to have a full-time role right away. And again, we've got him at 11% ownership with a 3% chance to be an optimal. So I think I'm going to be fading Pat Freiermuth. We have enough, good tight ends at relatively inexpensive prices. I don't think we need to go all the way down to 2,500 there. Man, I feel like I'd be going against the tools to say I'm not going to play. Yeah, I don't think I can say it. I was going to say Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, to me, I'm a little bit nervous about it because Tommy DeVito is a quarterback now. It's just like, can you trust any part of that offense? But I do think if Saquon Barkley is going to get it done at all this year against the Commanders, like, this is the perfect spot to do so. Now that they've gotten rid of Chase Young and now they've gotten rid of Montez Sweat, like, I don't think it's a pass funnel anymore. I think it's just a bad defense overall. And the Giants, if they want to win the game, you'd think they're going to feed Saquon Barkley. So I want to say it, but we have positive leverage on Saquon Barkley, and because of the matchup, I don't think I can go against the tools on that one. So I don't think that's it. I will say one of our biggest negative leverage spots, Dalton Kincaid, which it scares me a little bit to fade it, but he's up to 4,900, and we've got Kincaid at 15% ownership. It's a tough spot against the Jets. We have him optimal just 7% of the time, so it's not something I feel that comfortable with because he has been getting so much volume in a great offense, but doesn't look great in our tools right now.
I have a lineup with Breece Hall and Dalton Schultz in it. I'm just saying.
Schultz or Kincaid? Breece Hall or Kincaid?
I'm sorry. I said Schultz. I meant Kincaid. Yeah,
oh, yeah. I mean, if you are going to play them, it makes sense to have those two in the same lineup, right? Like, you want to play the correlation game. You don't need to full fade them just because there is negative leverage there. I mean, you look at it, still like 7% optimal. It's like, that's not nothing. So I have no issue with doing it. It's just something like overall across my lineups, these are guys I'm going to be underweight to the field on.
No, it's just kind of funny because the only thing that repeats in my head is that run that Breece Hall had up against, I believe it was the Bills, where he had that breakaway run, but he ran out of gas because he was just so out of shape from being injured all year. And it's like, if only he was in shape to just take that one to the house, he would have, I think we would be having a completely different conversation actually this week because not everybody remembers that run that he had.
I remember that run very well because I saw this. It was like, man, last year it might have been week 1. And now they also got rid of Michael Carter. So like, and they're saying they want to get Dalvin Cook more involved. The coaches are saying they want to get Dalvin Cook more involved, but I think it's really just Breece Hall is that good. They don't really need, and maybe he gets more involved in the passing game now. Cause it was we just thought a couple weeks ago, they were just peppering Michael Carter at the end of the game with targets. Maybe Breece Hall is that guy now.
Can we interest anybody in a flyer on Israel Epinaconda? Like, I mean,
is he going to be active?
I feel like he has to be. He's the third running back now.
True. Yeah.
So I think that's just funny. I think it's a funny deal. Like if somebody played Izzy and he ended up somehow getting a touchdown or two on like 2 touches. All right. Let's go ahead and let's build this next lineup. You said you'd actually like to build a lineup with Fields, right? Like this could be the lineup.
Let's do it. I mean,
lineup.
Fields is your guy. I feel like we got to go to a Fields lineup.
We have to do at least one Fields lineup. That's literally what I told everybody is you're going to see an Anthony Richardson or Fields lineup. Any rushing quarterback, we're going to do one at least minimum if they're below, 7K. So yeah, a Justin Fields lineup has to be played. And honestly, DJ Moore at 5,600 still blows my mind as to how that happens. I mean, this dude was an absolute stud on the field with Justin Fields. And although he played some easy defenses, right? And it just like manifested itself because all of a sudden Justin Fields broke out of this curse of this mindset that he was having. And after his first 2 games, just crushed it with DJ Moore. You still got to take that chance. Like, we're not playing cash games. We're talking about tournaments here. And this is the ultimate boomer bust duo right here is Justin Fields and DJ Moore. So we got those guys in there. Do we want to run a triple stack? Do we want to go game stack heavy? Do we want to play like David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs with Amon-Ra St. Brown and, go with a sleeper in here and also play Cole Kmet? Do you think that this game could actually hit that like 60-point threshold that we've seen the potential of both these teams having?
So my biggest hesitation with this game potentially going off is the Chicago side. So if we're playing it with Fields in there, we're playing it like Chicago is going to be putting up points. I feel confident that Detroit is going to put up points on this Chicago defense. So yeah, I think if you are playing a Fields stack, I would full on game stack. And I would certainly have at least one bring back. How do you usually stack up your Fields? Because I can go both way with you. Can do the double stack. You could always single stack Fields and hope for the rushing upside. How do you prefer to play it when you stack up Fields?
I mean, I could run Fields out naked if I, really feel like it. Depends on, how the defenses play, to be honest. And with Detroit, we never really know what to expect. Like, we don't know whether to expect man or zone because they switch everything up so often. We don't know if they're going to end up taking, 60, 70, 80% of the time of possession and not even giving an opportunity. But with this game, I honestly feel like we could see a ton of breakaway opportunities for Jahmyr Gibbs, even David Montgomery, who I don't think is like, typically if David Montgomery's in one of my lineups, I'm playing that defense. I don't want to play him with because he's going to get 5 yards carry on every single carry, but he's been carrying it 20 times a game, and that's going to run the clock out, and you're not going to have very many opportunities for the other players to score. So I don't like going to heavy stacks when I play David Montgomery. But I think that could change this week because the Bears defense is just so terrible. So, I like playing Fields naked. I like playing him with a one-off stack typically because I like the rushing upside. I normally don't do double stacks.
Okay. That makes sense.
Meanwhile, I have philosophy with the Lions as well.
So with the Lions, I will say this about the Lions. We have Jahmyr Gibbs currently projected for 17% ownership. We have David Montgomery projected for under 1% ownership. So at those ownership levels, David Montgomery looks fantastic to me.
Did you hear about what Dave Montgomery did last week?
Giving up the goal line carry? Yeah, pretty awesome. Is he going to do it against his former team? I don't know.
Fuck no. This is a revenge game.
That's right. So
I was just waiting for you. I was kind of building it up. I was waiting to see if you're going to take it. But I mean, essentially I was going to get to that point. This is a revenge game for David Montgomery. Like this is where they let him walk for Khalil Herbert. Like they let him walk for Deonta Foreman. They let him walk for nobody, essentially. They drafted Roshan Johnson after saying they don't need him anymore. David Montgomery, Dan Campbell's going to light a fire under Dave Montgomery's ass that is going to push him to probably 3 or 4 breakaway runs this game, which I don't know if David Montgomery's ever had a breakaway run because he's not fast enough.
He just did last week. I think he stepped out of bounds, by the way, but he had that one. It was like 70-something yards, right?
He did, man. It was like Ramondre Stevenson with a 68-yard run where we just haven't seen it, and it's like, oh my God, he can't do it.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, this is a David Montgomery game, man. Like this is him right here, and I think that Detroit's up. And honestly, to get off the leverage, I don't even feel like we need to play Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't feel like we need to play those guys because Dave Montgomery could have 3 touchdowns in a Jamal Williams-esque, experience. And that's all we have to do. That's all we have to play. Now, we could go super heavy on this. We play some Cole Kmet, play some, some Laporta. We could go crazy on this matchup. Yeah, I think it depends on what you think the over-under is going to be. Or what you would bet on the over-under. I think it's in at 48 points or so, 48.5.
Ooh, that's tough.
Let me look at that.
But I mean, regardless, I feel like if we're playing a
48.
Fields lineup, we're playing for the over. If we're playing Justin Fields in the lineup, we're assuming an over. So we could stack it up a little bit more than this if you wanted to throw in Darnell Mooney. But you said you prefer the single stack. I think that makes a lot of sense. We could see the same thing they did with the Commanders with the 3 touchdown game for DJ Moore. That's what you're really hoping for here.
Yeah.
So that could certainly happen again.
Concentration of points to limited players. We're hoping for Justin Fields to get a rushing touchdown, plus probably 60 to 80 yards rushing, excuse me. Like, we're looking for concentration of points in this matchup. And I think that the game story, right? If we're going to tell ourselves a story, that could happen on this level. I'm down for this. Let's roll with this. Let's roll with this, this one-off stack, and let's see if we can work something else.
Yeah, and we in this one, because we went a little bit, I guess we didn't go that cheap, but cheaper than the last start at least. We have a little bit more money to work with here. So looking at our boom bust tool at Stochastic, the 3 players who currently have the highest odds of being optimal are 3 mid-range Texans guys. Devin Singletary, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, all kind of falling in that over 20%. They're the only 3 players on the slate currently that we have that have an over 20% chance of flex plays, at least over 20% chance of being optimal. So I think throwing one of those 3 in there makes some sense to me. Do you have a preference between Singletary, Dell, and Schultz?
Yeah, let's go Tank Dell for sure. That's my babe.
Yeah.
We're going to play him. And I don't want to play Tank Dell and Schultz because now we're insinuating that touchdowns are going to happen from CJ Stroud, which might end up overcoming Fields' production. And we kind of don't want that game to be a shootout. We want that game to have a ton of offense with turnovers included, which Stroud last week was turning the ball over. So, I mean, we want turnovers to happen without touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I think if we go Schultz, we're insinuating touchdowns, especially play Tank Dell in there as well. I'd like to get an Arizona guy in here, and we could have a ton of money to play with. Like, we're talking about something. We're talking about being able to leverage this entire slate with this lineup I'm about to propose, which is putting in Michael Wilson. So we have Justin Fields, Dave Montgomery, DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Michael Wilson. I mean, this is kind of what I brought to you at the beginning of the show, where I was like, can we get there without an 8K wide receiver or an 8K plus wide receiver? This could be the way that we do it and save money. Are you against playing Tank Dell and Michael Wilson? Is that too cheap for you?
Not at all. No, I think Michael Wilson, we've got some positive leverage on him. 10% projected ownership, 13.5% chance to be optimal. The only thing is we just you need to remember on Sunday to make sure that he's actually in the game, because as of right now, he's questionable. So
we put Rondale Moore in there just in time being.
you don't have to remember this.
Yeah, just so I don't have to remember this lineup. No. I'll check it. I'll forget that this is the lineup that I just changed Michael Wilson out in.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Rondale Moore in for now, but I think Michael Wilson could easily fit that. Once again, this is a skeleton lineup, everybody. So go use the DFS optimizer over there on PlayerProfiler.com to find those optimal lineups using the skeleton build. But yeah, I mean, Tank Dell, Rondale Moore. That's a fun combo of 2 guys that I feel like we're like. I think I tweeted this out. I think I said that Tank Dell is what everybody wanted Rondale Moore to be, like including myself. Like, and I love Tank Dell. Loved him from before, before like the whole evaluation process was happening. Noticed him right out of college. I'm like, this guy knows how to score touchdowns. He's led the league in yards, and like, yeah, he's small, but like, this is a different animal. This is a different player. This is somebody that's just they're built different mentally. So I think that Tank Dell is what we all wanted Rondale Moore to be, and he's succeeding over there. So I think this is just kind of fun right here. Meanwhile, we have 5,500 left. I want to put a placeholder defense in. If we're insinuating turnovers, I think that we could go with the Texas defense again. But is there a defense that you really love this week? I mean, we're the one that I like for this situation, who's only sitting $200 more than the Texans, would be the Dolphins up against the Raiders. We all know that Jalen Ramsey's back. He's looked healthy. We're assuming that by playing 3 lower end wide receivers, that neither Waddle or Tyreek Hill are going to put points up on the board enough to break the slate. So is Miami in play here for you at all?
Yeah, Miami's certainly in play against a rookie quarterback. Yeah, makes some sense there. Yeah, I don't have strong opinions about defenses, but that's certainly one that could work out against AOC in that defense. So yeah, I don't mind that.
Would you like to play Devin and Chain to kind of stack that up together, or Achan, excuse me, Achan.
Achan, that's right. Yeah, we know now. We know now how to say it, so we
know
get it right. Yeah, Achan makes some sense to me. We have him at excuse me, very little ownership. He's a guy that we know doesn't need a ton of opportunities to get there. Certainly is somebody that you can play. So yeah, I think Achan, I don't know that the tools are really like updated for what we're really expecting this weekend, but it sounds like he's good to go. I'm expecting him to come right in and get some opportunities just based on what he showed early in the year. So yeah, if you want to throw Achan in there, I think he's a guy who's going to come in relatively low owned due to being out for so long.
Yeah, and honestly, keep in mind, like, the clips that came out about Mike McDaniel were more meant like comedy type clips, like saying like, like, how do you have Achan in fantasy? Like,
yeah, how much money do you have in fantasy? Yeah, that's funny.
So I think that they got clipped out, but right after that, he goes on to praise about how Achan literally like came back to practice and couldn't be touched. Like, the guy was literally untouchable, is what he's saying. He's like, people tried to tackle him and they couldn't even put a hand on him. So he's hyped that Achan is back. It does worry me, but we don't have to 10 touches. He could get there in 10 touches.
Especially against that Raiders defense, pretty easily. Like, I mean, he's been doing it all year. He's been just a monster out there. So yeah, doesn't need the opportunities necessarily.
All right, let's go with Achan for this lineup. We're sitting at 6K left. We need a tight end and a flex. We go to tight end next and then figure out where we want to play with that flex, or do you have a guy that you might want to flex that you have in mind, and then go with a tight end and see what we have left?
No, let's fill in the tight end. And I think that there are a lot of interesting options here. So we already decided we're not going to Dalton Schultz. I think we decided we're not going to Trey McBride because we're going to the Arizona receiver instead. Could go to somebody like Evan Engram. Looks pretty good. We have him 19% ownership, 20% chance to be an optimal. A little bit of a pass funnel there in Tennessee, and Engram has had pretty nice production, and not production. He's had pretty nice opportunities this year. So at some point you would expect him to hit. I don't hate the idea of playing a pretty inexpensive Evan Engram.
What about Samuel Porta? I mean, I know that we talked about David Montgomery getting touchdowns, but he has to get there somehow.
Yeah, if you want to full on stack up this game,
breakaway runs, like,
yeah, no,
I think he's a legitimate threat here. Let's throw him in there.
Let's try it out. See how it looks.
We have 6,200. It feels good. I don't know how it looks, but it feels good.
I think it looks good too.
All right, I'll take that. Oh man, Aaron Jones looking at us in the face. Like,
against, I mean, his opportunities have come up recently. Let me look over the past two games what Aaron Jones opportunities have looked like, because I think it's been elite. Yeah, he's been playing 58% of snaps, 33 carries over the past 2 weeks. He's also run routes on 50% of dropbacks for the Packers. He has 11 targets. So it's 33 carries, 11 targets over the past two games. That's pretty elite. Now he gets a Chargers defense that it's been a run funnel for forever. Less so this year. This year they've just been kind of bad overall. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense going to Aaron Jones there.
At least 5 targets in the past 4 games. He has 5, 5, 6, 6. That's nuts. Dude, I mean, that he fits in like a glove.
These lineups just coming together for us.
Honestly, like, I can't even try to argue. I'm not even an Aaron Jones guy, right? Like, I'm not that.
Yeah.
Not the Aaron Jones guy. And my favorite player on this slate, with Gibson being out, is Brian Robinson, who is $400 cheaper. But I feel like we got to go with Aaron Jones, in hopes that he sees that focal point. I mean, Brian Robinson Jr., by the way, didn't get to talk about him earlier, but I mean, he is a sweet matchup, and he's been seeing targets lately, and like, teams aren't even paying attention to him, right? Because he hasn't been used in the receiving game as much as he has recently. I mean, like, who else do they have? Chris Rodriguez, right? They have nobody behind that, and I'll be at that game, so I'm sure that it's going to be a shit show for Washington, because I'm going to end up showing up and rooting for the Commanders for the first time in 5 years. And I'm sure that Washington will find a way to fuck that up, because I've never been to a game where they've been winning. But that's a good thing for Brian Robinson if he's involved in the passing game and gets to see some receptions because Washington's losing.
I mean, you can't ask for a better matchup than the Tommy DeVito led Giants. Like, it's a terrible defense. They're not going to be able to score. So you'd think the Commanders playing from
Short
ahead,
field
which is a
opportunities
game
too.
script that really works out for Brian Robinson. Yeah, everything is there for Brian Robinson to absolutely smash. I still feel like in this particular lineup, I would probably go Aaron Jones just because we have the salary for it. And he's going to, my guess is that Brian Robinson's ownership comes up closer to lock, but I think either one of them is a fantastic, whatever you want to play. This is your lineup, your money on the line. So if you think that you just like Brian Robinson better in a vacuum, I think that makes sense.
This is going to be our money after we win.
I don't know
what you're talking about. It's going to be our money after we win big. No, so I actually, I really like Brian. I can't come up with a game script where Brian Robinson isn't heavily involved. It doesn't see 20 touches. I think that Aaron Jones sees north of 15 touches, but I can come up with plenty of game scripts where, AJ Dillon all of a sudden is taking it to the house at Green Bay, where, he typically does towards the tail end of the seasons when they need to start reeling it in. They want to save Aaron Jones for the playoffs. Now, obviously, that might not be the situation this year because they probably won't make the playoffs this year. But, yeah, I'm down for either. Let's play Aaron Jones. Get Aaron Jones in there. We can play Brian Robinson another time. But I will say that Brian Robinson is in probably close to 25% of my lineups.
To me, that I'd be more inclined to play 25% Brian Robinson than Justin Fields. So I can get closer to where you're at with Brian Robinson right now. I am like
How many lineups do you play a week?
It varies. Like, so I'll play probably any week I'm playing at least 30. I have not been 150 maxing this year. It's just gotten to the point where I don't think it makes sense. So typically somewhere in that like 30 to 50 range. Okay,
cool. Yeah, I'm right around 100. Typically, I'll enter 50 to 150. So it just depends on how much time I have.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some sleepers, man. Let's discuss some sleepers, Neil. We got some time, a little bit of time. How many time we have? We got 4 minutes. No, we can spend a little bit of time if you have the time in. We don't have to rush through this too quickly, but of course we do want to escalate this a little bit. Do you have some sleepers that you really like? And sleepers can be somebody that just has very low ownership, somebody that's super cheap. Who do you really like this week that you think you would classify as a sleeper?
I mean, Stafford, I already kind of mentioned him earlier, but we have Stafford at under 2% ownership. So at that level of ownership, I think at quarterback, Stafford definitely somebody that I would consider. Jordan Love, I think we have it under 4% ownership. Again, great matchup for the Packers against the Chargers. They're probably going to need to be throwing it. So don't hate the idea of playing Jordan Love. Just at quarterbacks, those are a couple. As far as running backs go, so if you want to go like way off the wall, which I like to do from time to time, and I did this last week and it almost worked out, not quite, but with the Cowboys being at the Panthers last week, we saw everybody wanted to play Tony Pollard. I kind of think that's going to happen again. I actually played some Rico Dowdle last week, and it worked out fine. I don't think he hit his ceiling outcome, which is like playing half the game, because last week Rico Dowdle we saw got 50 yards in the first half. I thought he was very live for 100 yards and a touchdown. Ended up with 79 and a touchdown. But in a matchup with the Panthers, terrible defense, if the Cowboys can put him away, I could see Rico Dowdle being a guy who ends up getting more opportunities than most people are expecting. So that's kind of my like most off the wall type of play. Yeah, I think the Brian Robinson ownership is going to come up significantly. So I don't think that I could name him as a sleeper. He would have been one if the ownership was going to remain low. You could go, I mean, with Devin Achane returning, we currently have Raheem Mostert at sub 1% ownership. I don't know if I totally trust that, but if we could get Raheem Mostert at low ownership, I think that he also, like whichever one of them on Sunday, if either one of them is getting low ownership come Sunday, I think either one of them makes a ton of sense as a sleeper running back. So those are just a few off the top of my head. What do we have? Saquon. We have Saquon at 10% ownership. So yeah, it's I guess I mentioned him as a fade earlier, and now I'm going back and saying if he was low enough, I'd consider. But we do have decent ownership going there.
Sub 5%, sub 2%.
Yeah,
somewhere in that range. I went to start typing up a thing once again about Tony Pollard, and I just thought he was going to see low ownership. Turns out that he's not. I think that as we get closer, Rico Dowdle hype is going to pick up, especially because of the echo chamber that's created within DFS, where everybody talks about the guy that could be it. And Rico Dowdle, looked more explosive last week and yada, yada. But Tony Pollard's still the guy there. So I think if ownership drops like below 10%, I'm going to have a lot of Tony Pollard as a sleeper.
I think that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah, if he ends up getting lower owned,
Yeah.
currently we've got him at 14%. But I agree with you. There is something to like people played him last week and he failed for them. So then sometimes people are like, oh, I'm not going to touch him this week. I'm not going to make that mistake again, and they jump off, and then the player goes off. So you can hope for that.
I mean, we haven't built a single lineup, and I haven't built a single lineup, by the way, prior to this show, where Tony Pollard fell into my lap at the pricing that he was at. Like, it just didn't happen. Like, I haven't seen Tony Pollard's name pop up on my sheet one time within the top 5 names. And if I haven't noticed them because they're just sexier options. So I think by the time it's all said and done, I don't see how Tony Pollard comes in north of 10% ownership. So I'm probably going to be playing him a lot more often in terms of somewhat of a sleeper. My main guy over here, I have 2 guys. One's more of a dart throw. The other guy is more of a sleeper. Jamo, who is getting so much hate because he hasn't been able to catch, right? Because
they're loving him right now.
You said they're loving him?
Detroit is loving him right now because he's been showing moxie. He's been blocking. He's been saying
blocking,
all the right things. I just want to be
block? I watched the block
great block,
game, and I was like, dude, he just threw his body at that dude. Does he know that he gets injured pretty easily? Like, it's like, don't do that, Jamo. Right. I know they're telling you to block, but don't do that.
To be clear, I agree with you. DFS players not loving him right now, but Detroit, I think, loves him right now.
Yeah, I mean, and he caught both balls last week. He didn't drop anything, which is inspiring to say the least. He just seems like he's getting his football feet underneath him. And I'll tell you this, man, in the offseason, I bought up a lot of Jamo, and then I saw this Instagram feed of him at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was on the West Coast, so for me it was like 11. For him it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's just like sitting there looking into his phone, doing this weird swervy dance thing. And people were asking questions about football. He's not even saying a word. And then all of a sudden, I don't know where he goes, stop asking me about football. I don't give a shit. And like at that point, I got fucking scared. Like
seen that one.
He felt like football. It's not out there. I was literally watching a live feed, and he said it real quick, and he ended his feed almost immediately. He's sitting in his car by himself. It was done. Like nobody. Like if anybody was recording that, they would have made a lot of money through whatever outlets they decided to send that to. I don't think anybody got. But I will say he made me nervous in the offseason. I think that the city's gotten behind him. I think that the coaching staff has gotten behind him. I think that he's getting his mindset right. And although I don't know any of this stuff, I'm just guessing. It just looks like he loves football again, and it didn't look like he loved football earlier in this year. Meanwhile, competition's coming in with DPJ. The whole football community right now, in terms of fantasy, is against him. I don't think he's going to see high ownership, and it's more hopeful, wishful thinking, versus statistically accurate type information. But I think that in a high scoring game, if you're going to stack this game and you want a contrarian play, I think Jamo should be in there as a dart throw. But Kyle Phillips is my guy. Kyle Phillips is the dude that I think, as long as Traylon Burks is out, could end up seeing a significant amount of targets, could break the slate with a couple of touchdowns at his price. He's not going to kill you if he doesn't go off. But, I mean, Kyle Phillips for me is a dude that he just can't do no wrong for me, right? I can't see him failing your lineups, but I can see him making your lineups for you. I think that he can get in the end zone. I think that if this game becomes, somewhat of a blowout on the other side of the ball and we have to see the Titans pass, I think that Kyle Phillips could be heavily involved. I mean, Tajay Spears is a guy that I would like to see in that role, but they still have Derrick Henry. Meanwhile, Kyle Phillips has nobody else in front of him. I mean,
so let me give you my pros and cons to Kyle Phillips. So the con to me is only 44% route participation over the past 2 games for Kyle Phillips. Doesn't scream a high floor guy, more of a you need him to really hit on one of his plays because he's not out there and he's not running enough routes. The pro would be the Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator came out a few weeks ago and said, we want to force teams to be one-dimensional. We want them throwing the ball. So they're one of the few defenses in the league that is actually trying to make other teams throw the ball. And in that case, Kyle Phillips, I mean, certainly a guy who, if you're going to force him to throw, he's a guy who can get into the end zone. So I think that there's, there's pros and cons there. But as a player who's going to get 0 ownership, you can certainly make a case for a guy like Kyle Phillips.
I mean, if you had to face Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor 4 times a year, would you want them running the ball?
Good point. Yeah, maybe that's what he's talking about.
So I mean, he wants the opposition where he has to play multiple times a year to throw the ball. But meanwhile, Jacksonville, they also have speed, right? So they want guys dropping back so they can get the sacks. The way that you avoid giving them sacks and giving them strip sacks and turnovers is to find a release valve, which is Kyle Phillips. That's why I like him this week. Meanwhile, Jacksonville's not great in the slot. So we have to see what happens. I think that he's obviously the price for a reason, the cheaper guy for a reason, but I think he is a sleeper that you should consider putting in your lineups if you're down there playing in the low 3K range. All right. We have one more lineup to build. I normally don't suggest like the final lineup unless the guests pick the other two, but there's a lot of heat going around for Brock Purdy, and I think Jordan Love could be fun, but Brock Purdy might give people a little bit more of a building point as to where they can expect to go with these games, because this should be one of the higher scoring games on the slate, and something that where both teams are actually pass funnel teams. Baker Mayfield is also another guy that I would put up there for contention, but obviously with Brock Purdy being chalk, well, not chalk, he's 12%. With Brock Purdy being up there in terms of ownership percentage, maybe we should build that and give people a way to leverage off of the chalk.
Yeah, we can try. You can certainly make good lineups with Brock Purdy. It's always tough for me to decide where I want to go when I have Brock Purdy in lineups. So you start with Brock Purdy. You got to name the players you want to stack it with. Who do you like with Brock Purdy this week?
I don't know. That's your job. You got to figure that out.
I just told you it's your job. What are you talking about? I'm the guest.
So honestly, I like George Kittle. Obviously moving forward up against Tampa Bay, I think that he's physically imposing and probably the best athlete on the field. Meanwhile, we don't see a ton of pressure from Tampa Bay. It's kind of like clockwork, right? With San Francisco. If you have a good rush defense, George Kittle ain't going to have nothing for yards because they're going to leave him in the block because they need the extra blockers. We've seen San Francisco pretty much be healthy on the offensive line for the most part. I don't think that mostly sure Tampa Bay doesn't generate a lot of pressure. I think they're probably around 18% pressure rate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right. So I don't, they're not going to get a ton of pressure, which means that George Kittle should be involved in the receiving game plan without just being screens and stuff. We're going to see downfield targets to George Kittle. I really like George Kittle in this situation because I don't think that he sees a lot of ownership. Also, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, let me see here.
And I don't see a lot of people paying up for tight end this week. I think a lot of people are going to be using tight ends as budget players.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I don't think we're going to get a ton of ownership to the guys you have to pay up for. Yeah, we have Kittle at 1.5% ownership. So, yeah, looks like a nice spot.
Yeah, let's click smash on that one. Meanwhile, Christian McCaffrey, interesting for the receiving game purposes. I don't think he's going to do a whole lot in the rushing game, but that's a good thing for him, right? They're going to alternate, his touches, and he's going to get a ton of work in the receiving game. So
makes a lot of sense in a Brock Purdy stack. We have Christian McCaffrey 13.6% ownership, 15% chance being optimal. So we have some positive leverage there too. So to me, makes a lot of sense in a Brock Purdy stack.
Let's go with Christian McCaffrey then. I know Tampa Bay's second, but very similar to San Francisco, where you're going to see a great number up against Rachaad White. Rachaad White doesn't get used in the running game. He's primarily a pass catcher, which is how I'd actually like to run this one back.
Let's do it.
Is going with the pass catcher, the receiver, Rachaad White, not the running back.
All right, so we have 4,500 left over still.
Dude is just, he's getting, 47 yards, 46 yards, 7 yards, 65 yards in the past 4 games for Rachaad White. This dude is not a running back. He's a receiver.
Yeah.
This is the next great passing catch, pass catching back.
Yep, looking great.
All right, do we want to run another wide receiver with this? We know that San Francisco, like I said, is a pass funnel defense. We could do Mike Evans. We could do Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin probably has no ownership. Mike Evans is probably 5%, 10%.
Yeah, we have Evans at 5%, right on, and then Chris Godwin we have at 1.7%. So I think, Evans projects better. He's been the guy this year, but I still think Godwin has those big games in him. So I don't hate the idea of playing. And he's cheaper, 800 cheaper, 6,600 for Godwin. So I think Godwin would be my preference just because he's cheaper and lower ownership. But clearly, if you want to go to like Evans has been the guy this year, he's been the one getting it done. So yeah.
God, this is insinuating this game is going to be a shootout, which is really scary.
That is scary for a Tampa San Francisco game.
Like, are we doing this? Are we doing it? Is this something that could actually happen, or should we go skinny stack? Are we getting too involved here?
Let's see if we can. Let's throw in some cheap options here because we're at this point it's looking difficult with sub 4,000 left per remaining player. We gotta choose some
Godwin's
cheap
expensive
guys
for what he's done, man.
He is. Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting Godwin out of there. If I were, that would be the first one out of there if we're gonna redo this.
Yeah. Well, let's check a defense real quick. Let's do a placeholder. It looks like we're probably not going to be able to fit a Miami player or a Vegas player in here. So let's play that defense as like a solo play. If you're down with that.
Sure.
And we can pivot down or we can pivot up. We now have 4,200 left. This is getting tight, man. This is getting so tight.
Yeah, we got to get 2 receivers in this. So probably at least one of our receivers needs to be pretty inexpensive.
Kyle Phillips.
Yeah, I mean, you just made the case for Kyle Phillips. Why don't we go to your guy?
Yeah, let's take a look at that real quick before we just throw him in at 3K. I mean, he's had 61 yards, 68 yards receiving without the touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins has been, pretty much as lame as a wet bag of chips, where the bag has been opened and everything's stale and nasty at this point.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns a couple games ago, right?
It's been like 4 weeks ago.
Was it that long ago? Okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Maybe 3 weeks, but I think it's been 4. Yeah, I mean, Kyle Phillips is there, right? And although he doesn't give you a ton, if he gets you double-digit fantasy points, you're happy at 3K, right?
True. Yep. Yeah, we could try that out.
Are you happy at are you happy getting double-digit fantasy points? Let's say it gets you 12. Are you happy with that, playing a 3K player?
Yeah, I'm not like ecstatic about it, but on this slate where I don't think we have that much great value, I think I'd be happy with 12 points out of Kyle Phillips. Yeah.
All right, that's not just a cash play, right? We're talking tournaments. You're cool with hitting that mark.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw, what was it? A few weeks ago, we saw Utica take down the Millie, getting 6.9 fantasy points out of Bijan Robinson. So you can certainly win the Millie getting 12 points out of the 3,000 min price Kyle Phillips.
All right, let's go. All right, my friend, we have about 4,800 left, 9,700 in total. We have Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Rashad White, Chris Godwin, Kyle Phillips, George Kittle. Dolphins defense, we need a wide receiver and a flex spot. Are we going to go with a stud and a feasible guy, or should we go mid-range on this one and find some guys around the 5K range?
Thinking we could go mid-range. We could go back to your guy, Tank Dell, once again. I think he looks right here. Quentin Johnson, another guy. I mean, we do have Keenan Allen in there, but Quentin Johnson has seen increase in opportunities. He's just 4,200. If we want to go to different players than we've seen in other lineups, I think that makes some sense to go to somebody like Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, Quentin Johnson's sexy. Sorry, I had to check on Christian Watson over here at 4,600. I never even thought about playing Christian Watson, right? I'm thinking like Jayden Reed just because of the pricing. I look at Christian Watson at 4,600, who's seen at least 7 targets. This guy's seen 7 targets, at least 5 targets for the past 5 games, at least 7 targets in 3 out of the past 5 games. I mean, but he's not doing anything with them, right? He has one good game, okay game. Like Kyle Phillips is probably doing better than him, and he's been half the price of him throughout the whole thing. So
if you want to talk about chasing the dragon, I've been doing that with Christian Watson. Just like it seems like at some point he has to hit on some of those long plays. Hasn't happened recently, but those are the kind of, like, this is a great spot against the Chargers. As you said, he is leading the team in route participation over the past couple games, 72% route participation. He has a just 13.6% target share, but that is leading the team at least. So a guy who hasn't really gotten there recently, but we know that he has the ability to put up that long ball. I don't hate the idea of going to Christian Watson, and that's obviously cheap, pretty cheap there.
My fear of Quentin Johnson is the tough matchup and the fact that he caught everything thrown his way last week. I mean, that's somewhat of an outlier thus far in the season. He did have one good game where he caught 5 of 6, but for the most part, he's been about 66 catch percentage or completion percentage when targeted. He's a downfield receiver, right? So we don't expect him to get a great catch rate. But the thing is the catches that he's supposed to be making, he's not, and he's not getting targeted enough to have drops, to have a 66 completion, rate. So
go ahead. I think we have exactly the right amount to get to. Is it 4,600 for Christian Watson? And then is it 5,100 for Devin Singletary? Or am I thinking of Dalton Schultz?
I think it's 53 for Singletary.
Oh, you're right. It is 53 for Singletary. So we can't quite get there. I was thinking that would have been perfect if we could get Watson with Singletary. Who could we get for if we throw?
Let's throw him in real quick at 4,600.
Chuba Hubbard.
Wait, let's throw him in the wide receiver. The wide receiver position at 46 for Christian Watson. Now for the flex, we are looking at Jaylen Warren, who I love this week. I know that it's completely contrarian play. I love it because it's contrarian up against Cleveland. John Dotson, who I don't want anything to do with. Deontay Johnson, who I don't want anything to do with. Dalton Schultz, who just doesn't correlate with our lineup. We have Darrell Henderson. I mean, honestly, it's really ugly. This whole
it is kind of ugly.
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks. I mean, he just had the big game last week.
But are they going to need a pass?
Maybe not.
Dude, this isn't. All right, Khalil Herbert is here. But I mean, three-headed monster. Dude, this is an ugly. All right, I'm giving everybody a heads up. We're looking through the slate, right? That everybody that's listening to the podcast, we're looking through the slate, and from 5,100 down to probably 4,600, 4,500, it is ugly. Like, this is not an area that you want your team to land for the last spot. I'm going to take out Christian Watson, man, because I just don't think that I like anybody in this range unless even if we pivot off. Well, actually, no. You know what we could do? We could do a correlation where we pivot down from the Dolphins defense, go with the Texans defense, and then play Singletary.
Beautiful. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Right? Like, that correlates. It works out. Let's go ahead and get rid of the Dolphins D. Let's play the Texans D, and that puts us at 5,300 left, which
that's awesome.
Leaves us with Devin Singletary. Boom.
That's a great looking lineup.
That is. It came to fruition. We don't have a ton of chalk. By the way, I mean, by playing Chris Godwin and Phillips here and Christian Watson, there's no way you're going to hit. Nobody else's lineup is going to be built with those three players in there.
Yeah, it's going to be a unique lineup.
Yeah. You're not going to find that lineup anywhere else. You don't have to worry about chalk. You don't have to worry about anything along those lines. You're in there. So we do have Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Rashad White, Chris Godwin, Kyle Phillips. You have Christian Watson, George Kittle, Devin Singletary, and the Texans defense. Neil, love it, man. We ran 15 minutes over, dude. I'm about to get fired for that. It's going to happen. I'm blaming it on you.
Yeah, it's my fault. Apologies to the entire team for going over on the big tilt. But we made some good lineups. It's all going to be worth it. When you hit on these lineups, you're going to get your salary and more.
Yeah, the whole team better be playing these lineups, because if they're playing these lineups, they're going to win money, and then they would be happy that we went over to discuss that final one, because if we were rushed, we never would have gotten to that final one. We never would have thought about how we could drop down the Dolphins defense and then correlate Singletary with the Texans D. It never would have happened.
Exactly. So at least we made the right lineups.
Well, hopefully I didn't get you into any trouble, man, by keeping you for too long. Before I get you out of there, where can we find you, man?
You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I do a lot of showdown content right on Twitter. Otherwise, I'm on the Stochastic YouTube channel, or my written work is on the Stochastic website as well. So, at Stochastic, the YouTube channel, or if you just want to find me, again, at PlayerQDFS on Twitter.
Love it, man. Thanks for coming in. Hopefully we can beat our best lineup, which, by the way, took place with Jacob Sanderson back a few weeks ago. Jacob Sanderson. Oh, you know Jacob. I see you nodding your head, huh? So yeah. Jacob and I started, we were on the Big Tilt last year doing the whole show together. He came back as one guest spot this year, and we absolutely annihilated. We were 3 people away from having the optimal lineup.
Ooh.
Like the optimal, not the Millie Maker winning lineup. 3 players away from having the optimal lineup, which we could have all fit those guys in. And we talked about playing those guys. We just didn't get there for that lineup. And we were, that's
tough. That's tough.
Cried in my bed until at least Thursday. From Sunday to Thursday, I shriveled up like a prune in the middle of my bed. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. You guys can go find me over there at FF_intervention. Make sure y'all tune in next Friday night, 7 p.m. That's right. We're doing something on what is that? Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving weekend. I'm still here, baby.
Yeah.
I'm still here to make you some money. And make sure y'all go follow me on Twitter to get my favorite slate, some of my tips for my favorite slate, the Thanksgiving slate. Neil, I don't know if you cover that one, but that one is.
Oh, I love that one.
God,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's
every
so
year.
good.
It's amazing.
It's my favorite one to play. That's actually the slate that I've made the most amount of money on ever in my entire life. So
Nice.
I love it, man. I cannot wait to join that. Make sure y'all go check that out over there on Twitter at @FF_intervention, and tune in next Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in, guys.